Hi everyone, this is Notias Panzer and welcome back to my hobby channel. In this video I will cover some different and exciting weathering and painting techniques. In the last episode the T-55 was finished with a paint wash, but there are still plenty of effects to create until I got this model tank done. Now I still have to make some hand acrylic painting and creating some light dust on the lower armor areas. And the most important part, to complete the weathering of the trucks and wheels. So stay tuned for the video beginning and I'll catch you after this. As many of you might remember, in the last episode I painted all the little details with acrylic colors. Now it's time for the rest vehicle details big enough for being more detailed. So I put my acrylics on the table and I start mixing. For this I chose a simple but very effective palette. I started with yellow ochre mixed with a little bit of red, and later I added some green color for creating some kind of a khaki tone. The resulting mix is very similar to a common military blanket or similar. For creating the highlight tones, I add first some sunny skin tone from Vallejo, which is a very good color for these matters. And for the final highlights, I added some pale sand to make it more pallid. For creating the shadow tones, I added again more green tone. And this time also more red color to the mix to desaturate it a little bit more. The result you can see on the palette, it's a whole range of colors that I'll use for painting the gun mantlet. When I paint this type of detailed parts, I use special brushes. In this case, a Raphael brush size number 1. I start applying the paint using the shadow color. I feel more comfortable when I use first the darker shades, and later I only apply highlights. This is only a painting way, but in my opinion I think everything is more straightforward. This time it is a little bit lighter, so it will create some natural contrast. The key is to leave the paint on the main wrinkles and details of the piece, leaving the recessed areas with the previous color. In the first highlights, it's very important to cover all the correct parts and define correctly the whole piece. Later, I change the colors towards the lighter ones. The highlighting area has to be the same but smaller each time. Now I move to the color mixes with sunny skin tone and I keep painting. You can see how every tone I add to the piece increases the contrast and makes the volume higher. The final highlights are just a few strategic touches on the top of the piece. Very subtle but still effective. With the pale sand highlights, I start outlining the piece. Outlining pushes the painting to a higher level of definition, because the contrast between the lightest and the darkest areas really makes them pop. This is the final result once all the piece has been painted and outlined. This time, because I don't pretend to create a very heavy weathered and deteriorated vehicle, I've tried to create some extra contrast on the mantlet cover. Okay, so let's keep working with acrylics for now. I take burnt red from Vallejo because it's very similar to the primer color I used first. My first application is to use the sponge method. When working in this way, I always like to control it very well. Sponge method has its own risks, like creating the exactly same chip on the paint, or even worse, to create some ugly and big chips because you don't remove the excess of paint from the sponge itself. So carefully I start reinforcing the chipped parts by applying some chips here and there. Right now, because the main chipping work has been done, I only focus in representing chipping on the most evident areas where there are not any chipping effect applied. Just in the turret I created some extra chipping because there were more areas without paint chipped. Now I move on to a paintbrush, this time a 0001 with a very sharp tip. I like to change the tools I use for creating the weathering effects, because you can create great variations even inside the same effect. The paintbrush makes me feel more comfortable while painting, and at the same time it makes me more precise for detail painting. With the paintbrush I just painted some scratches on a few selected areas. Also I use it for painting next to some sharp areas where the sponge can get into them, or for enhancing some previously chipped parts that I didn't like them too much. By creating some extra pattern I can connect some chipped paint parts with others, making them more coherent. For chipping the tow cables, I just add some black paint to the burnt amber color. With this I get a darker chipping tone that will be very effective for these parts. Finally, I take aluminum color from Vallejo Model Air range. This metallic color is excellent. It has a great covering capabilities and adherence to the surface. With this metallic tone I decide to represent some scratches on the wall beams. Welding material in contrast with the armor steel, it is not affected by corrosion. so for our modeling purposes it is a great opportunity for creating some extra effects on the model. Here you can see now all the results from this second chipping stage. Alright, now it's time to leave all the acrylics apart. Once I consider that I have completed all the main armor weathering, I move to the funniest parts, mud and dust. I use these three products to create a mud mixture that I will apply on the lower areas of the tank. Using the foundation of the AK enamel paint, I make it thicker by adding some pigment color and plaster. The resulting mixture becomes a thicker variation of the main enamel color, but due to the plaster, when dry, it will have a lighter color. Moving to the lower areas, I start speckling this mud mixture. An old brush and a toothpick are more than enough for this procedure. You can vary the effect application by loading more the brush for a heavier effect, or just removing the excess from the bristles for creating some fine-grained splashed mud. I keep speckling on the lowest areas, because due to the tank moving, the heavier mud is always going to be accumulated on these extreme lower areas. In some areas, I just applied directly the mud mixture to enhance the effect. When the mud mixture is almost dry, you can remove the excess of mud you don't like much by blending it with enamel thinner. Later, with these two oil colors, I prepare a light dust tone for creating some color variation on the mud, and also applying them like a dusty color wash. I apply this dusty color wash in different ways. I start by speckling it on the main surfaces, or just leaving it directly with the brush on the details. Later, as always, I proceed to blend and remove the excess. This time, I use more enamel thinner and a soft brush, because what I pretend is to blend properly the light dust, not removing it. When blending the oil wash, I also made some streaking dust effects, which are always very effective on this type of plates. Now it's just a matter of moving the paint into a point you feel satisfied with the result. The application is very similar in the front and rear areas, but with the only exception that I try to focus more on these side areas closer to the running gear. And here is the final result of the lower area. By complementing these two effects and blending them later, I created a very realistic mud and dust effect on the lower area. I know that they will be very hard to see, but all of us will know they are there. Okay, so this second half is going to be all about the tracks. Tracks are one of the main parts of a tank model, so they deserve a special place in weathering. I start by painting some missing details with acrylics. I mix US Field Drab, Hull Red and Black to create a desaturated reddish earth tone. In real tanks made from steel, moving wheels tend to polish the surface, so this darker color will become very useful for preparing these inner areas by darkening them. With Leadbelcher from Citadel Paints, I paint the outer ring of the idler wheels. Full metallic wheels get completely polished by the external parts. For the main weathering, I will use these three oil colors and pigments. I like to control my workflow, so I start with the interior of the wheels. First, I speckle some pigments on the recessed parts of the wheels, trying to reach every corner of the piece, and later I fix them using pure enamel thinner. Once they are prefixed, I complete the process by applying an earth oil wash. Using two different pigment colors plus the earth wash will create enough dusty shades for this task. Apart from fixing the pigments, I also apply the earth wash to create some dust effects on the external area of each wheel. When I work with some identical pieces like the wheels, I always try to create some variation. It is important to find something different on each wheel. If not, they look like the same piece and they will be less interesting. The amount of dust and the places where it tries to accumulate are different in place and size on every wheel. On the external edge of the tracks, I keep the same weathering approach. First, the dry pigment, and second, I fix them with oils. There is no need to worry if the pigment extends to the darker area previously painted, because I will fix this later. Also, once I finish the effect and while drying, I decide to add some more pigments directly to the effect here and there. This will give some extra texture and more variety of color. For representing the mud accumulated inside the track links, I spread all the piece with the same pigment colors but in higher quantities. I try to leave small amounts each time and in different areas. Alternating both tones will also help for a more visual interest. As I did with the wheels, first I prefix the pigments with cooling enamel thinner, and this allows me to keep the pigments in place so they won't move while manipulating the whole piece. With the light sand oil mix, I apply a generous wash all over the tracks. Alternating both tones really works and creates different shades of mud. the general look of the whole piece is very convincing, and because I use the same tones for wheels and trucks, everything feels very integrated. If you feel happy with this type of result, you can leave it just like this, but for my taste, I think I can push the contrast of this piece even more. So for increasing that contrast of the trucks and wheels, I take raw amber oil color. This tone becomes very useful when creating this type of effects. First, applied like a heavy wash, I use this raw amber color on the wheels details and recessed areas. This is like defining the shape and creating some evident shapes that were blurred when creating the mod. I focus now in reach every corner and recess. For this effect, it's better to avoid applying the wash on the most exposed areas, if not, the result wouldn't work at all. I work also on the drive sprocket and idler wheels. These pieces, depending on their main details, will receive different amounts of oil wash. As I already said, raw amber color is very versatile. So this time I started speckling the oil wash on the external side of the track links. Speckling will create extremely small dots on the mud effect, changing the main tone of the mud and increasing the texture feeling. Also, using this color, I applied some selective washes inside the joint above each link. You can see how effective is this technique. This is the very first time I apply a wash in this way, but I am pretty happy with the result. Once all the dust and mud work has been completed, it's time to move to the polishing effects. Because all the wheels and trucks have been glued together, it's hard to reach the inner area of the track links, so I use a mechanic pencil to polish these parts with graphite. I only polish the area where the rubber band of the wheels press the track links, leaving the external area of the link without polishing. I take again my lead belcher color and I paint each tooth link. This might seem time consuming, and in fact it is, but at the end of the day, the effect is worth enough, and the result looks like real polished metal. For polishing the external side of the trucks, I just take my graphite pencil, and I start pressing it against the main surface. By this time every detail counts, and this is a very effective technique and effortless. So finally you can see the completed running gear pieces. So many techniques and effects applied, but all of them completely necessary. Painting and detailing trucks and wheels can be hard and frustrating, but it is a key part of the weathering for the scale modeler. So that is all for today. Here is the final result of this episode. T-55 is nearly finished, but there are still some effects to do in the next episode for calling this green guy down. About the model, I like how it goes, because everything is going pretty straightforward. The result I got with the mounted cover and the side blanket is very good in my opinion. The main hull of the vehicle is just perfect and ready to receive the last weathering details. Next episode will be about finishing the main hull of the tank, and also I will cover all the engine and fuel spilled liquids, as well all the main accessories of the model. If you like the video and interested in future content, consider to subscribe the channel and hit the bell to receive all the updates. Also, if you missed anything or have any doubts about the painting process, you can leave a comment in the box below. So, thanks for watching and I see you in the next one.